I got somewhere to go. Sky above and dirt below. Sweetest street I ever strode. Talking about Caliche Road. Anywhere on this old sphere, you can find your way from here. But when you start from my abode, you're starting from Caliche Road. Put yourself out on the street, point your head and start your feet. Watch your step, don't squash a toad, stepping down Caliche Road. To get from here to there, you gotta learn when and where. You gotta turn and learn which way to turn, and learn how to know when you're gone too far. When I want to sing and shout, there's a place that's hereabout. If you promise not to tell, it's over past that old dry well. Twisted trees and rocks in stacks, canyon walls that sing right back. A secret creek I like to go, a little off Caliche Road. To get from here to there, you gotta learn when and where. You gotta turn and learn which way to turn, and learn how to know when you're gone too far.
Yeah, I'm ready. Okay. Here we go. All right, go. You could say that my career has been remarkably varied, or you might say that it's just been all over the place. There have been times when I was irritated with myself for not focusing on one discipline, and other times when I was pleased that I've explored so much. I've been working a long time. I've learned a lot, and I've kept notes along the way, helpful stuff for me to remember. It's a long list, but I've been boiling it down to 100 things. Tonight I'm going to share just a little sampling, and I think here we go. I have to look there. The test of a good visual idea is whether you can explain it over the phone. If you can't, the concept is too complicated. A hero of mine, George Lewis, was the brilliant art director of Esquire magazine in the 60s. His concepts were simple, straightforward, and powerful, easy to explain in a few seconds over the phone. Oops. Massimo Vignelli supposedly said that you only need 6 fonts. I think that's seductive. It's an audacious idea that I really responded to. In practice, you can kind of do it until you can't. Until you just really need that 7th font, maybe an 8th font. It's a seductive idea. It doesn't work. Okay, you present 3 concepts to the client. The client dismisses number 3 right away. Concepts number 1 and number 2 are both good, but very different. Clients can't decide. They want us to combine the 2 concepts into one, to which we say, oh, you want the combo platter. Oh, ooh, God. You need a tagline. Don't lock yourself away and try to write it. Instead, just listen. Someone around you will unwittingly utter the perfect tag. Your job is to listen for it. It's a little like catching butterflies with a butterfly net. I was very young, scared shitless, moving to New York to work with the most famous living architect at the time. Totally unsure whether I could hack it alongside the young architects from Harvard, Yale, and Princeton. It took, I don't know, 2 or 3 days before I realized that, yes, they are brilliant, but I'm pretty damn smart too. It's the best lesson I ever learned. Ooh. Johnson wore the most elegant dark gray and navy suits. This is a true story. My dear desk mate, John Bowley, wore a very nice brown suit to the office one day. Mr. Johnson looked John over, top to bottom, sniffed and said, brown, it's a servant's color. I did try to mix architecture and advertising cultures once. It doesn't work. Architects are like monks in a monastery. They like minimal. Advertising culture is like the circus. Advertising people have Pez dispenser collections and they want to hang canoes from the ceiling. It's oil and water. It doesn't mix. Buckminster Fuller said this. I just love this quote. there's nothing really I can add, but I can catch my breath here now. White paint is not just white paint. Some white paint has a pinkish cast, some a bluish cast. Some is too white and too bright. After many years, I finally discovered that the right white is sold at Restoration Hardware, of all places. And it's literally called the right white. And it is. Le Corbusier edited all the colors in the world down to 63, and every one of those colors works with every other color. When I need to select paint colors, I don't pick up Benjamin Moore. I pick this up, I go straight to Corbu because that's Corbu. I went to high school in Houston looking to buy a surfboard one day. The Con Ugly won me over with this ad. It's a fundamental principle of advertising. If there's a negative, admit it up front. Another example, Listerine, tastes bad, works good. I still have my Con Ugly, by the way. It's alarming, and I don't get it. Precious few young designers these days seem to know the history of their own profession. It's crazy. It's depressing. Kids, this is an old man wagging his finger, learn your history. This is very straightforward. The standard business card in this country is 2 inches by 2.5 inches, about 3.5 inches. It's an ugly proportion. Instead, if you make it 2.25 inch by 3.5 inch, just add 1/4 inch, it's much prettier proportion. It makes all the difference, and it's very close to being a golden section. You're welcome. I've been a Mac guy from the beginning. It's all I know, and our office PCs occasionally come into play. I don't know how to do anything on a PC, and at this point, I don't really care. Vinny, our IT guy, is completely sympathetic and said to me, dude, we'll get you through this. I know you're trying to retire. Oh my God. All architecture and design can be put into one of these 4 categories. Good aims high and achieves it. It's high art. Think Ellsworth Kelly. Good bad isn't really trying. It just is, and it's pretty damn good. Think Deep Eddy Cabaret. Quentin Fiore is one of my real heroes. He designed Marshall McLuhan's Medium as the Massage. I've got a copy that I somehow got in 1967. It's dog-eared, falling apart. I still have it. I love it. Caught up. Okay, years ago, my friend Woody proposed a $10,000 fee to a client to do a small project. The client said, oh man, I don't think we can go that high, Woody. Can we just buy a couple hours of your time and get some ideas? Woody said, oh yeah, of course. I charge $5,000 for the first hour. It goes down after that. This is the last one. It may be the best one. I learned this in kindergarten, actually. Learn something new and draw and sing and play and work every day. We might add and take a nap. Thank you.
Okay, I'm ready. So the future has a past, and I was walking on this beach in Bray, Ireland in May, and every single pebble and stone on that beach is completely polished from thousands and thousands of years of the ocean rolling over it. And we all tell our stories, and our world is made up of stories, and some people would have you believe that it's a beginning, a middle, and an end, but really it's more like flash fiction, and it just blows by very quickly. And the stories make up the stories of our lives, all the little stories every day. This is an accurate photo of my childhood. I was lucky to have a stepmother who was a planner, and she created hundreds and hundreds of happy memories for us of summer spent at the Lake of the Ozarks, fireflies and lanterns, campfires, time spent on ski slopes. and traveling around the country in our VW camper. And these stories became very important to us when there were 4 little Indians, and then there were 2, and 2 of my brothers passed away when I was in high school. And so those stories were very important to us. And we talk about this a lot in communication when it comes to identity. I was lucky to grow up with a wonderful storyteller, my father. My father was born the year that the banks closed, and every single day, my father came home very excited about his work. So he told wonderful stories every single day about everything that happened at work. And yeah, so he loved his work, and so he inspired me to really love my work. And when I was getting ready to graduate from grad school, my alma mater, Rockhurst University, called me and said, "We'd like you to come teach for us before somebody else gets you." So I went back and I taught for them for a while, but I wanted to be in Austin, but I pitched a study abroad program to them, which they bit, and I lived on this street, Maitre Albert, and I created the first, and I taught intercultural communication in the EU. This is a one-way street, 1 block near Notre Dame. And I created the first internship at the Louvre, the Pasteur Institute. We had internships with Nike, Doctors Without Borders, and Francis Ford Coppola. On that street, I made friends with a black and white cat named Hooligan, who introduced me to someone I became very close to, Aileen Mosby, in her elder years. Aileen Mosby was a very famous journalist. In fact, she broke the Marilyn Monroe nudes in the 50s in Hollywood and said that, Marilyn claimed that Aileen Mosby made her career. She was very shy about this and she didn't brag about this. What she really wanted to do was work in Moscow, and she later became the very first woman to be working in Moscow. In fact, the KGB actually poisoned her one night to hurt her credibility, and finally they wanted her to go to Paris, and this is actually a photo of her white MG that they shipped to her. And she interviewed Lee Harvey Oswald when he did that. Another great storyteller that has influenced our lives greatly was Stephen Bruton, and some of you here knew Bruton quite well. He played with everybody from Chris Christopherson to Bonnie Raitt. He created a lot of beautiful memories for my son when he would pick him up and take him around in his vintage blue Porsche. Stephen didn't have a child, so he acted like our son was his child. Important is that almost everyone we know is a musician, and Stephen said the most important thing when a musician has a new record come out, it's the story of where they are right now. And Stephen was a good man to float the river with in times of need. This was my best friend, George Reef. This is an iconic photo. George made me braver and stronger. And many of you know that I love you so much. A dear family friend of ours actually did this, the musician Amy Cook. And that's who did that. It's kind of a mystery. George taught me a lot about friendship. I lecture in my communication classes a lot about friendship. George was the 3rd person to hold my child after he was born. George was a really rare person. A lot of you here tonight knew and loved him. And one of the cool things about teaching college is that your students will let you know the current lingo, and Grey's Anatomy gave us this word, your person, and George was my person. And he was like my big brother, but more than that, he was my best friend, but more than that, he was my person. And he died a year ago, as many of you know, and he was a bona fide rock star, but he was my person, he was my best friend. And many of the lessons that I learned about friendship, I learned over the years through George. And it's been a huge transition for many of us to go through that. He was trustworthy. You could call him at 3 in the morning. A lot of people say that defines a good friend. Who can you call at 3 or 4 in the morning and answer the phone? That was George. And we lost him last year, and everyone still loves him and does so many stories. So his story will live on for a very long time. The biggest story that I've probably been able to be proud to be part of is becoming a mom. I think it made me more mindful. It made me have deeper empathy. It really opened my eyes to the world a lot more. It's also been a really fun and interesting time to raise a boy. I don't know that their generation completely understands this. It's been thrilling to hear his songs on the radio, and he is, obviously I really like my son because he's my son, but he's actually a really good person, and he's a really good musician, and Margaret Moser captured him early on for the Austin Chronicle to write for. So there's not that many stops on the train of life, and all of the flash fiction really matters, and all of the stories really matter, and all of your friends really matter, and when people want to be part of your story, it's a beautiful thing. And when we fall in love, that's what we're trying to do. And to quote my husband in another song you might have heard on the radio, everybody's just looking for a big, sweet life. Thank you.
All right, so as a graphic designer, there are a lot of moments where I just hit a creative wall, a creative block. So the first 3 images you're gonna see were something I used to call 30-minute poster. I would set a kitchen timer, 30 minutes, and I would just play around with an image. And it was a way to sort of get out of my own head, so to speak. You know, sometimes as a designer, I spend 2 or 3 hours just answering emails, trying to help somebody figure out why their email doesn't work. And they sent me the email telling me their email didn't work. So it was a way to sort of wake myself up. And when I was finished, I would flatten the file, throw the source file away, and most of the time, it was just awful. But I didn't care because it wasn't about the end result. It was just about waking up. But every now and then, something would be kind of cool. And I'd always wanted to be an artist instead of a designer. And I always thought, at some point in my life, I'll come back to that. And the inertia of life gets you. And 15 years, 20 years later, I'm finally back to making art. But what it took was actually pretty horrific, but we'll get to that later. Let me briefly explain how this stuff is made. So you'll see a lot of textures, you see a lot of faces and portraits. So what I do is I'll find the shape of a body that I like, and then I'll fill it in with noses and eyes and mouths and body parts from different sources. So all the faces you're seeing and all the bodies you're seeing are essentially invented. You know, a leg from a different source, an arm from a different source. And I like the idea that when I do that, it still looks like a black person. So some of these body parts you're seeing, some of these facial features you're seeing, I'm actually taking European features and just stacking them until it feels like me. And there's something about identity. There's something about code switching that I have to do every day. If you were with me at home during Thanksgiving vacation, I wouldn't talk like this at all. There would be a lot of profanity. There would be a lot of smack talk, but that's at home, that's comfortable. When I'm at work, interviewing for a job, talking to a potential client, I have to be different. I have to be non-black, is a way to say that. I don't want to say white, but you know what I mean. So the idea that I have to subjugate my identity, and I've done it for years, I thought, okay, now I have intent. Now I have a reason to make art because I want to talk about that. I want to talk about how we're taught beauty is something else other than me, that righteousness is something else other than me, that justice doesn't belong to me. And some of these names like Trayvon Martin, Philando Castile, it hit me like a ton of bricks when I realized I already had a list of names in my head from my childhood. It was Emmett Till, George Stinney, Tawana Brawley, Amadou Diallo. There were people who had already been taken from us. So the notion of using art to have those conversations, I'm not after guilt. I don't want your guilt. I'm not after anger. What I desperately want is empathy. I want you to understand where I'm coming from. When I have these conversations standing in front of a piece of work, it's a beautiful experience to talk to someone who's from a completely different background, and then when they walk away and I walk away, they take a little bit of me with them, I take a little bit of them, and it may not save the world, but it is this wonderful moment, something I've been desperate for a very long time. So, I mentioned the name earlier. It was George Stinney. I want to talk about a few details about this kid. He was 14, South Carolina, 1944. He weighed 90 pounds. He was a tiny little boy. He was accused, tried, convicted, and executed in about 6 to 8 months. No evidence. And since then, the conviction's been thrown out. But his mugshot just stayed with me forever. So I took the outline of his mugshot and I used my eyes, my mouth, my nose from childhood photos. And then I did another series, same shape, with those same resources from my cousins. And it was a way to reach out into the past and reach out into the future as well and apologize for all the time that I let go by, for all the chances I had to speak up for myself, to speak up for what I believe in, to speak up for my culture, to speak up for my people. And I'm so happy that I found that. And the last piece you're gonna see is that piece I'm talking about. It's emotional, but it's a good emotional. It makes me feel like I'm finally doing something worthwhile. Like I've been designing logos for 25 years. I don't care. If there are any potential clients in here, I do love logo design, so don't think that. But to make art for love and for just finding a reason to be here is a beautiful, beautiful thing, and this is the piece I was talking about. Those are my eyes, my nose, but the shape is from a mugshot. And I'm so, so happy, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity to share that with you, so thank you very much.
We are the filmmaker, writer, photographer, and graphic designer for the traveling art exhibition titled Refugee is Not My Name. This show meets people where they are, in public and iconic spaces throughout the city, and invites them to come and learn the names, see the faces, and get to know some of their refugee neighbors.
So for over 2 years, we've been interviewing refugees in Austin, encouraging them to say what they want to say. Most of the participants that we've met through this project, we met in their ESL classes, led by local nonprofit I Act for Refugees. When talking to them, we took their lead, reframing our questions when need be instead of editing their answers.
And the goal of this project is to facilitate connections through art and introduce these individuals to people all over our city. The traveling show has been to Louis Carnegie, where it opened in March 2018, to the Girls Impact the World Film Festival, to the Austin Central Library Gallery, ACL Music Festival, and is headed next to East and the State Capitol building.
As we came to know refugees in Austin, we wondered if, as artists, we were in a position to help amplify their voices, to build a platform they could use to introduce themselves to you as they see themselves, to choose what they share, to be seen as individuals, because they all share a label, but they each have a name. In the spirit of the project, tonight we want to introduce you to some of your global neighbors.
All right, this is Azar, 28 years old from Iraq. So when it comes to resettling in Austin, a city that values the weird, Azar is all in. She says, keep Austin weird. I love that phrase. Not boring. People in the city wearing what they want, doing the things they love. Now when I wear my hair wild and crazy, I call it my Keep Austin Weird hair.
This is Badouan from Democratic Republic of Congo. Badouan approaches the issue of refugees as a trained educator, but also from personal experience, saying people need to know who is a refugee and why is he a refugee and what qualified him for resettlement. Being a refugee can be a kind of disease. Sometimes people get treated like someone who can't even hold a pencil.
This is little Lu Huwere. She's 9 years old from Uganda. When we asked her in the interview, hey, Lu, what kind of pet would you want? Her answer was, which one doesn't need me to clean up its poop?
This is Khadija. She's 34 years old and from Afghanistan. Khadija recalls her first day in Austin when the case manager brought her to her apartment saying, we walked into the front door and I saw fresh flowers in a vase, furniture in the apartment, a whole chicken in the fridge. I said to the case manager, there's a good possibility that I might have a heart attack from happiness right now.
This is Ali. He's 28 from Chad. Ali is a driver for Uber and Lyft, but his dream is to own a farm and become a veterinarian one day. He prays 5 times a day with the aid of an app on his phone called Direction that points him towards Mecca. When asked what he prays for, Ali says, what I pray for is that I can really become someone here in America.
This is Yasmin. He's 32 years old and he's from Bosnia. Yasmin's lived in Austin now longer than he lived in Bosnia, and he remembers those early days in Texas really clearly. He says, our family got resettled to Austin when I was 15 years old and the most beautiful thing happened to me. I discovered Frito pie in the school cafeteria. It was delicious Texas black magic.
And this is Lambert. He's 18 years old from Tanzania. Lambert's resting face is a big grin. Of his new home in Austin, Lambert says, when I'm walking down the streets in Austin, I feel like the owner of this place. It's not hard to make friends when you're nice. I want to be a musician, but also maybe a doctor. Yeah, a musician and a doctor.
This is Grace. She's 37 years old and she's from Myanmar. Grace and her husband started a boarding school in Malaysia when they were living there as refugees. She tells us how she was able to care for and cook for over 60 children at the school. If I am confident at something, it's that I know I can help someone. If I see someone who needs help, I am sure I can go and help them.
This is Tesfaye. He's 60. He's from Eritrea. So Tesfaye is usually smiling, which he says comes from not thinking badly about other people. In English class, he says, a man got offended by a cultural slight from another student. I told him, it's okay, friend. You have to understand where people are coming from. It's okay. Come sit by me.
And this is Hanya, 25 years old from Afghanistan. It's hard to live in a new country. It takes a lot of adjusting. And Hanya described her way of decompressing. She said, when I feel stressed about the future, I like to carefully remove the polished color from my nails and redo it. It relaxes me. It helps me take my mind off my worries.
This is Payman. He's 35 from Iran. Payman's vulnerability is stunning. He says, I am LGBT, and if I tell you my story, you will probably cry, and I will cry too. I've lived for more than 30 years in Iran without the freedom to express myself. Now I do not need to hide my sexuality or my beliefs. There are no words to describe how this freedom feels.
This is Missouri. He's 45 years old and from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Missouri is a former French teacher, and he's serious in his portrait, but he loves smiling, dancing, and writing poetry. When we asked Missouri about the source of his good humor, he said, I've always been laughing since I was very young. I love to laugh. I'm Congolese, and Congolese likes to joke.
This is Nabil and Anam from Iraq. Nabil, a retired aviation engineer, was one of the first refugees we interviewed for this project, and his description of his resettlement experience stays with us. He said, it is the matter of peace that we came here for. When we landed in Austin, it felt like a bird released from a cage.
As artists, the 4 of us were challenged to really keep the integrity of what each refugee said and to not manipulate their quotes. And that was a real challenge for the 4 of us.
We created this project to shine a light on our refugee community, a way for you to engage with people you might not normally see. This project doesn't have any sponsors, and we don't have any specific expectations, but we hope you'll be inspired to reach out to a refugee.
So we asked people who attended one of our exhibitions to write down on a card something they shared in common with one of their refugee neighbors. One person wrote, "You've taught me that being a refugee is powerful." And we agree, because every voice is powerful. Some of them just need a little help amplifying so the rest of us can hear them. Thank you, guys.
Between April 2015 and March 2016, I lost both of my parents. My dad first. He was slowly consumed by Alzheimer's, and then my mom, who died alone on the dining room floor with her uneaten chicken dinner, her will, and all essential info about her estate spread out there on the tabletop beside her. It was Super Tuesday. I loved both of my parents, and now they were gone. Soon I started to feel forgetful like my dad and worried I'd just pop off from a stroke or heart attack like my mom. My bike's always been my savior, but the usual neighborhood ride wasn't clearing my mind. I wanted rough, wild trails, so I opened Google Earth and looked for green. In deep South Austin, about 10 miles south of here, I saw a big, pleasantly shaped green space nestled around Onion Creek. I zoom in and Google Earth names it Onion Creek Metropolitan Park. I zoom in closer and I see that it's full of trails. It's accessible from the south by Knuckles Crossing, a charming old rural-style road that keeps making 90-degree turns. This area has somehow always seemed humbly but exotically charged to me since I first saw it on a long bike ride more than 30 years ago, so I was excited to see what lay beyond the pavement. The park's largely undeveloped. It's big and wild and full of trails, more than 440 acres. I had a sense from Google Earth of my starting point, but I wanted to learn my own way around this little wilderness, to map it with my brain and body. I'd get lost and turned around, and I'd have to find my way back again and again. The park's also full of spines and thorns, so I started carrying a spare tube and a small tire pump. I'd announced I was going for a ride in the park, and my patient and loving wife started looking at me funny because she could see I was becoming obsessed. I had to defend my new love of this strange place to the love of my life. But it's my path. I must go. Paths can lead to tunnel vision on a quick bike, but changing perspective and seasons revealed side paths I'd never seen before. I noticed some paths were surprisingly close, often parallel to each other. Even individual paths can have parallel traces about a foot apart, one ruddier than the other. All the paths interconnected except when something was in the way, like a ravine or a fence line or a steep ridge. But those barriers were crisscrossed with smaller animal paths. I followed those. As I learned the lay of the park, I began to wonder if there was such a thing as trail theory. I read a bestseller called On Trails and an amazing collection of studies called Landscapes of Movement, Trails, Paths, and Roads in Anthropological Perspective. Soon I was fixed on a strange thought. Given the park's location and proximity to McKinney Falls, could it possibly contain the footprint of El Camino Real de los Tejas? Did you know Texas has a Camino Real? It ran from Eagle Pass and Laredo to Los Adayas, the Spanish provincial capital of Texas, a little beyond Nacogdoches. Following animal trails and indigenous trade routes, some of the first Spanish entradas into Texas passed through this area as early as 1691. The only officially recognized Camino segment in Austin is at McKinney Falls State Park. Onion Creek Metro Park is just to the southwest of McKinney Falls, and that's generally the direction the Camino Real travels. Maybe the park had historic trail remnants, but what does a historic trail remnant look like? According to info I began to glean, it would look like a long, straight rut or swale, sometimes quite deep. The eastern edge of the park seemed like the most logical approach to McKinney Falls, and sure enough, in that trackless section of the park, I found a long, straight rut headed in precisely the right direction. I was really excited, but I didn't know who to talk to. I wrote local historian Richard Denny, and he told me to contact Stephen Gonzalez, the director of El Camino Real de los Tejas Association. Did you know that our Camino is one of only 19 historic trails in the National Trail System, alongside the Trail of Tears and the Oregon Trail? It's true. I sent Stephen some pictures, and he wrote back and expressed interest, but he's a busy guy, and it turns out it's tougher to convince strangers to walk in the woods to look at ruts in the dirt than I'd expected. This was last November, and my curiosity about the area's history was ignited. This place called Bluff Springs. Bluff Springs. Looking online at the Austin Statesman's historic archives and some old mail records, I found that post-Civil War, Bluff Springs was a mixed-race community with many formerly enslaved folks living right there in the place and near the folks who'd formerly enslaved them. Huge all-day-long picnic political rallies attended by thousands were hosted there. The picture was getting richer, but what about the Camino? I saw that the Camino Real Association was opening a new park called the Lobanillo Swales in far east Texas. I woke up at 4 a.m. and drove 5.5 hours to see the ribbon cutting and to meet Steven Gonzalez. He remembered me, and we set up a date to meet in the park. We met there on May 1st, and I showed him some particularly deep and long ruts I'd only recently noticed. Okay, halfway down the first rut, he said, "Brian, this could be really significant. It has all the hallmarks of a Camino site." I felt as if I was in a dream, but apparently I was in a swale. When I next spoke to Steven, he told me he'd invited 3 different groups from the National Park Service to see the park. Real round hats from headquarters. We've since walked the park with archaeologists and historic trail experts. This place has big, beautiful swales and evidence of occupation predating Austin. 1820, old nail, found an old nail. Steven's an old punk rocker, and he's impressed that I produced the Dead Milkmen. The archaeologist and I apparently went to the same psychedelic art croquet parties at the Ed Hall House in the late 80s, back when I was in the band Glass Eye and working at the old Whole Foods. I've contacted a planner for Austin Parks and Rec, and we're meeting at the park on Monday, along with Steven, a couple of historians, and some other Austin Parks folks. I don't know what'll happen next, but I've been walking El Camino Surreal. I get to hang with archaeologists, historians, and round hats just from following a rut in the dirt. Wish I could tell my mom and dad about it.
Hi, everyone. Who knows this sculpture? We're celebrating its 20th birthday this year. And the city told me last week they're making a little, they're gonna call it Nightwing Plaza. They cut off the street that swings through there. It's gonna be an official place. Garden hose for veins. I thought I'd show some foam sculpture you might know. Who knows this one on Guadalupe? When I made this, they asked me, "Can you make it pulsate?" I go, "Ew." Those bodybuilders, they're great. I lived near this place, and I saw them putting up the walls, and I thought, hey, it'd be great to put murals there. I wrote them a letter. They said, "Great idea." So I rented a scissor lift. It's really high up there. It's really scary. This is my second AIPP project. Still one of my favorites, Kitty and Doggy for the Town Lake Animal Center now. What's it called? Austin Pets Alive. Automobile paint on aluminum. They're about 30 feet long. Anybody know these? Okay. Yay. Thundercloud subs, one of my best patrons. I've made about 6 of these things around town. Are you hungry? They're styrofoam. They're about this tall. Everything's bigger than it looks. When the crane hooks up to it, it shrinks. Like these are really big. Tom Hatch Architects designed these as part of the signage, and I'm glad they did. It's been fun working on them, and it's nice to. They were on top of the Whole Foods sign. Now they're relegated to the parking garage where Whole Foods used to be. Wheatsville Co-op adopted the Manja Monster. Who remembers Manja pizza? That was so good. I can still taste that. I used to eat a lot of it when I was working for these guys. Yeah, glad to see it up there. It looks better there than it did in the restaurant. Hyde Park Barn Grill, I've made about 40 of these various things that appear and disappear on the fork. Every year we still drag out the heart and maybe a graduation hat and some other things. It's fun. People ask me how I transport these things. This is the turkey seen around the world. AP Wire Service took a photo of this on the fork, and I got pictures sent to me from Germany. Crazy Americans. Well, look what they're doing now. I feel proud of that. St. David's. I'm surprised people have seen this one. St. David's asked me to make this to promote their smile van. They have some mobile dental clinics that are really elaborate. It's just like going to the dentist. So they take them around to elementary schools mainly. This is the Impossible Burger. It's a meatless burger that bleeds. Milk Agency in New York designed it, and movement pedicab guys rode it around town. D.R. Horton, the builder, asked me to do a couple of playscapes and gave me complete free thought in doing these. The little frog has a slide behind it. I just designed things that I would want to play on if I was a little kid. This is Lois Goodman's backyard. She's a wonderful lady and a wonderful patron, and she let me work on this as long as I wanted to. I got to do Botticelli's Venus as a mermaid in the middle of this. Lois is in there somewhere. It's like 100 feet long. And the next slide is her driveway. In the future, all driveways will be painted. I was worried that the people would call the Public Works Commission, the water lake. Nobody's called so far. Z Tejas asked me to decorate their courtyard. So I took leaves off this tree and enlarged them, hammered them out of copper, which is really fun. Hammering copper, I recommend it to anybody. And then attached them to brass rods and made a hierarchic mobile. And it survived the wind. It was nice. This is one of my favorites. It's just a detail from, I did the whole children's ward at John Seeley Hospital in Galveston. And so this is using the grinder to draw with and translucent paint on aluminum. The undersea things to keep the kids calm and relaxed. This is a private commission. These people were really into scuba diving and wanted 50 feet of neon in their living room. It was fun to make. I was living in Norway at the time. I shipped it here. They call me the dinosaur doctor now because who's been to Dinosaur Park? It's down towards Bastrop. It's really fun. Great place to spend the day or a few hours looking at dinosaurs. If a tree falls, they call me and I repaint, or the sun bleaches things out. This is an example of some work that I would do for myself. It's automatic writing on steel with a plasma cutter, my favorite tool. When I discovered that, danger just fell to the wayside. And last slide, I draw caricatures. I've always done this by the hour at parties. Anybody want me to come to their Christmas party and draw? It's really fun. Thank you for listening.
Okay. So I'm Sarah Evans. Good evening. I'm the founder of an Austin-based international nonprofit called Well Aware, as well as Well Beyond. But the focus of my talk tonight is going to be the stories of some unlikely people who have made a big difference in the lives of others, as a reminder to all of us that we can all be a part of changing the world. I'm starting with myself. So I was born in 1975 in a hippie commune in rural New South Wales, Australia. We lived off the land. We did not have running water or electricity, and yes, there were very big, mean snakes everywhere. This was my first real toy. Then my parents moved us to a small town in East Texas called Crockett. The culture shock was real. I remember seeing my first flush toilet and thinking it was some kind of witchcraft. I spoke with a really weird accent, and I honestly didn't have many friends. Kind of became a loner. But I got through junior high, barely, and then I started to flourish, and I got some friendships. I graduated from high school as an overachiever, taking myself way too seriously. Went to undergrad here in Austin, and then I ended up at law school at SMU. When I got my law degree, I took a job at a really fancy firm doing securities law and compliance. But I was really not happy. I realized that the work wasn't a good fit for my heart. I then left that job, came back to Austin, worked for a firm with lobbyists. Again, not a good fit for me, and I was sad quite a bit, and I was pretty unhealthy as well, but I had cute cats. Then I met a friend who recruited my help on a project in Kenya, and she wanted to raise money to replace some of the livestock because they were dying from the drought. But I said, you know what? The root cause of this and so many other things is the water, so let's drill a water well. So we had our first shower strike campaign, and we flew to Kenya and we drilled a water well. So this project in 2010, our first one, changed my soul. I realized that this work was what I was designed to do. This little girl became my best friend on the drill site, and I held her when she drank the first water from the well, and I can still recall her feeling of joy and relief when she drank that water. Then I had a child of my own, and she was precious and perfect, and I struggled with the decision of whether or not I was going to continue this international work. Until a moment when she was 2 weeks old, and I realized I don't have to worry about her health when so many other moms have to worry about their children dying every minute of every day. So now, we're a team of activists together for clean water. She's amazing, and now she calls herself the Vice President of Well Aware. She's attended many board meetings, led some of them, and she's the best travel buddy and assistant that I've ever had. We're a mess all the time, but we're an unconventional, amazing team. So these days, I travel quite a bit. I'm in the field almost half the time. But being there reminds me every single time that I don't need much to have a wonderful life. Clean water and food and a basic education are what makes your heart happy. And so it's my most happiest place besides being with my kid. Mike Matuku was born in 1964 in Machakos, Kenya. He was a smart kid. His father died when he was 12, and he became the breadwinner for his family, his mother, stepmother, and 12 younger siblings, 11 of whom he put through school with his own money. He took some odd jobs and ended up working for the Kenya military. He did that for about 12 years. He also was a UN peacekeeper in Bosnia for some of that time. He then became a construction worker and managed projects until he became a Kenya safari driver in 2006. In 2010, Mike was my driver in Kenya on that first trip for that first well. And he was kind and he was hilarious, and he told me that I was already half Kenyan. And then I realized that the Kenyans tell that to all the tourists. But I knew that we'd be friends for life. Mike started volunteering for Well Aware as soon as I started planning more projects. There was never a task that he would turn down, and he became more and more involved. As a matter of fact, as Well Aware started to scale, he became our first paid employee in 2012. His starting salary was $150 a month. Mike is now our cornerstone. He is integral to the work that we do. He oversees all of our projects in Kenya and Tanzania, and he oversees a staff of 5. He's one of the most amazing human beings I know, and he has the best dad jokes ever. We're going to move to the other side of the world, and I'm going to tell you about some second graders from Webster City, Iowa. So these beautiful young children, completely unlike our typical donor, became incredible philanthropists for Well Aware through our first shower strike in 2013. Because of this teacher, Dawn Schultens, she convinced her administration, against all odds, that these kids, most of whom are on free or reduced lunches, could be connected to a global cause and could be change makers themselves. She's one of my heroes. So these awesome young people have been doing that shower strike campaign ever since. Now the shower strike is where we ask a ton of people to say you're not going to shower until you raise a certain amount of money toward clean water. It's not that hard to convince a bunch of 7-year-olds to skip bath time for a week. They really get into it. So they've been incredible ever since, have done the campaign ever since, and they're one of our biggest fundraisers. Just this year, they raised $20,000 for our clean water projects, and over the years that they have been participating, have raised more than $50,000 for clean water for people on the other side of the planet that they will never meet. Because of the efforts of these people, and many, many others, Wellaware has been able to transform 54 communities in 3 countries and impact 240,000 lives. We are 75% volunteer and 100% grateful. Thank you so much.
Well, we've already seen, this is what DJ was just talking about. As a photographer, I've always done things a little differently than my peers. So it was fitting the first animal I photographed wasn't a dog or a cat, but a dairy cow. I shot this picture of Shirley 8 years ago, not knowing it would be part of a collection of over 150 animal portraits. So from dairy cows to chimpanzees, I aim to showcase each animal's personality and their soul. I want these images to connect with you. This picture of Amari was inspired by Auguste Rodin's The Thinker. In comparison to the pensive, esoteric thinker pose, this photograph of Amari was inspired by the famous Burt Reynolds picture in the 1972 issue of Cosmo. Just like human emotions, I want to capture a similar range of emotions in my animal portraits. My intention is for these portraits to speak to you. What they say depends on the conscious and subconscious feelings you embody. Some may look at this portrait of Sheikah and say she looks fierce, while others may look and say she looks sad. I think that the emotions we apply to these portraits are emotions that are present within us. I photograph all my animals in studio where I'm able to keep a consistent tone and aesthetic. On this day, I photographed a lion, tiger, and bear. Oh my, you got it. The experience being so close to these magnificent animals is just unbelievable. In this shot, Dexter swiped at some raw chicken and it landed at my feet. He jumped off the riser he was on, came down to eat the chicken at my feet. The fear inside me was suffocating. But I knew damn well not to move. I took a huge deep breath as the trainer gently walked him back up on the riser. Jabari, bedhead, messy teenager with a mohawk. Jabari was only 1 year old at the time I photographed him, so this is his mane just now growing in. Uh-oh, my notes are freezing up here. So this is Perry the sloth. Perry, I knew I had to photograph Perry upside down. And in this next video you're about to see, I was on Good Morning Texas earlier in the week, and Ryan Gosling and Damien Chazelle were interviewed before me. And when they walked in, they made a beeline to meet Perry the sloth. And listen real carefully.
What's his name? Perry. Perry? Perry the sloth.
They were mesmerized. I kid you not, that was
How come he's here today?
my entire engagement with them. So, speaking of names, this is Alejandra the flamingo and Amelia the cockatoo. And these names are kind of part of this project and part of the personification of these animal portraits. But birds with their colors are just amaze me. So this is Eloise. When I photographed Eloise, I was able to put my hand on her shoulder and feel the just amazingly unique wrinkles in her skin, and I was able to feel the rise and the fall of her breath as well, and it was just an unbelievable experience. So this is another elephant. This is Rosie, and I out of all the animals I photographed, none do I feel so honored and just amazed to be in their presence as I do elephants. At the end of this shoot, Rosie wrapped up my 9-year-old daughter and lifted her 6 feet off the ground. So this is Krishna. Krishna is an Ayam Samani rooster. Ayam Samanis are all black from head to toe, cone, beak, feathers, even their meat is black. And so this is not Photoshopped. It's part of a collection of images that I photographed black images on black backgrounds. So this is my lone wolf, Geronimo. And this was one of the hardest pictures for me to capture in this series. But I often relate to it the most as well. I feel like a little bit of a lone wolf myself sometimes. So this is Murphy. Murph for short. Murph had me on my toes the whole time. It was, the experience of seeing him working with his trainer and me just being, so close to these two, it was just unbelievable. This is Maverick. We're back to cows again. This is a common theme in my work. Maverick had this mighty set of horns, and when I saw his profile, I saw that they covered up his eyes, and I knew that that was going to be the shot. So sometimes just a shift in perspective makes all the difference. Craft services for a squirrel are nuts. But not just any nuts. Merle the squirrel requested shelled unsalted pistachios. I kid you not, that's literally a pistachio in his hands. So, I photograph a range of animals, from lions and leopards to cows and chickens to armadillos. And, this was quite a moment, too. And there's Barry. But part of this is for me to just showcase these animals' soul and their personality and to connect with you. So after much deliberation, we finally settled on our cover model, Chica, for the cover of the book that DJ and Carla at Pentagram designed. And proceeds from this book are benefiting a place called Cat Haven in Fresno, California, which is an amazing sanctuary. So we're back to cows again. So this is one of my favorites. This shaggy beauty is named Gertrude. And I thought it was fitting because like any story, it ends in a circle. So, well, a cow to be more specific. So we start with cows, and here we are with cows. The last thing I'll leave you with Gertrude is when you look at Gertrude, what do you think she's thinking? Like, what do you think she's feeling? I think the answer to that is inside of you. So thank you.
When amidst this kind of media coverage, I announced my resignation from a top research position in order to found an organization solely for the purpose of saving bats. Virtually everybody knew I was going stark raving crazy. Tonight, I'll let you be the judges of that. At that time, Austin had become the centerfold example of just how dangerous bats could be. It was being announced nationally that hundreds of thousands of rabid bats were invading and attacking the citizens of Austin. Public health officials were warning that they were mostly rabid and dangerous. The people of Austin were signing petitions to have the bats eradicated. At that point, I realized that they had been terribly misinformed. I decided this was the ideal opportunity to prove beyond doubt the value of bats. I came to Austin armed with some unexpected but influential partners, real live bats. Our message was simple: just leave bats alone and they'll be happy to return the favor with big dividends. Today, decades later, our bats are not only very important, very popular, but we're also still waiting for the first person to be attacked or to contract a disease from our bats. They just go on night after night, consuming literally tons of insect pests year after year, attracting $10 million in tourism revenue to Austin. We not only have the largest populations of bats remain in the world, but some of the most spectacular animals. We have 31 species of bats in Texas. We can be very proud of these animals. But just as we're learning the value of bats, we're simultaneously discovering that they now rank as America's most rapidly declining mammals. Why should we be concerned when we still have so many? Because huge numbers of bats are essential to keeping ecosystems healthy and our economies prosperous. For example, each spring, our bats fly thousands of feet above ground to intercept invading moth pests, literally billions of them. And just one of our bats can catch enough of those moths in a single night to prevent them from laying 20,000 eggs on Texas crops, enough to force a Texas farmer to spray multiple acres with pesticides at a cost of $74 per acre. Our bats in the U.S. alone have been estimated to be worth $23 billion annually. And if we go a little bit further south into Mexico, we find, and I'm sorry this video doesn't seem to be working, that bats pollinating agaves are worth billions of dollars annually in revenue from tequila and mezcal. If we go to Southeast Asia, we find that the multi-billion-dollar-a-year crop, the durian, is so dependent upon bats that each flower has to be pollinated even when grown in an orchard. And where would we be without bananas? All of our modern bananas come from wild ancestors that require bats for pollination. If we were to lose those ancestral bananas today, we would lose a gold mine of genetic resource needed to keep our crops healthy in the future. Worldwide, throughout tropical and subtropical areas, bats like this are key pollinators and seed dispersers for plants that produce literally hundreds of key products important to people, including priceless timber. This bat is pollinating black bean tree in Australia. Bats like this account for 95% of the first seeds dropped in clearings in Africa needed to replenish forests. Bats like this are severely misunderstood and often intensely persecuted. In Latin America, this little bat can disperse as many as 60,000 seeds in a single night, and yet they're killed thousands at a time when people mistake them for vampires. As you've just seen, without bats, we might be minus many of our favorite foods and beverages, not the least of which are our favorite margaritas here in Texas. And speaking of Texas, we can be very proud of our accomplishments here in Austin. We today are home to the world's most spectacular urban wildlife viewing opportunities. We're now the world's center for educating people to appreciate bats. But I couldn't possibly have done this alone. I owe a great deal to the people of Austin who didn't think me crazy for coming to Austin to protect bats. But we cannot be complacent. Our bats are in decline. The good news is that it's not necessary. We can save them through education. However, today, I am still hard at work on their behalf because even our bats are in decline. They very much need help, and thanks to those of you here tonight who support my continuing efforts, we're doing our best to educate people not only in Austin but around the world. Our choices are clear. We simply have to protect more bats or suffer the consequences of more pesticides. And that's why this evening I'm urging each of you to join me in doing everything possible to save these long misunderstood but vitally important masters of our night skies. Thank you very much.
All right, let's get started. So my mother and father immigrated from Ethiopia to escape a brutal communist regime in the 80s, and it was a great thing because they had me and my little sister, who's actually up there, I was the first child that was born outside of Ethiopia. So because of that, I had a lot of learning to do. I didn't speak English at first, so I had a lot of Barney and Sesame Street to help me do that. This is my grandmother Hannah on my mother's side, and she never called me by my real name. She always called me Moded, which means to love. Yeah, it's real sweet. It's taken a long time, a little bit. And this is my father's mother. We called her Abiye, which is what you call like the oldest woman in the village. And she also never called me by my real name. She actually couldn't pronounce my name, Mélat. She would only call me Adisalam, which means new world. So neither of my grandmothers ever called me by my real name. And so, yeah, I grew up here in Austin. I was the first generation, but I had a very Ethiopian upbringing, right? So at home, we're speaking Amharic, which is the language of Ethiopia. We're eating injera, and we're dressing like this on holidays all the time. And, you know, it got a little bit difficult to manage everything. So one of the spaces that I found solace was in music. I found choir, I found solidarity with my friends, and I just fell in love with singing. Yes, I did. This is Cedar Park High School Choir. Yeah, we're fun. And another place that I found my solace was in writing. I wasn't really able to share what I wanted to say. I wasn't allowed to call my friends. I wasn't allowed to go hang out with anyone. So I was just home by myself, so I would just write. And those writings would turn into song, which, you know, kind of plays into what I'm doing today. And I had a terrible, terrible fear of getting a solo or trying out or just stepping up, you know, and but I loved the stage. It was really weird. Like, I would totally black out every time I was on stage, but I loved it, but I didn't want to do it. It was like this whole conflicting thing. And so I decided I needed to take the practical route. So I was going to do advertising in the entertainment industry. So I went to UT Austin, hook 'em horns, and I studied advertising there, and I met my manager. Now, I don't know where he is. He's here somewhere at UT, and he was actually producing a rap group, or a group of rappers out of San Antonio, and I eventually went from managing their marketing to putting out my first 2 EPs, Canon Afea and Canon Arania, which were all based on my personal feelings, and I was terrified to share these. And then what happened was, once I put them out, I got a message on Tumblr one day. I can't find it, so I had to put this up. But I got this message. This girl told me, hey, I heard your music. I was contemplating suicide, but your stories, your songs helped me out. And I said, this is where I'm supposed to be. And then, for my next project, a guy who was a producer out from LA put out a tweet, and he said, hey, I'm looking for a female R&B singer to work with. And a friend of mine just sent him my screen name, or not screen name, my @ and we made Move Me One. And we made this song here, which is called Revelation 8:2, which is about love and acceptance, and me really realizing that that's the message that I want to preach. That's the thing that I want to put out through my music. I want to share my optimism and my love. And then came my next project. It just kept going. This is a 5-song EP where, for the first time, I branched out and I actually worked with multiple producers. I didn't just stick with one for the first time. And it showed me my capability, what I could do, because I was always so terrified to do these things. And then came Maven, which was my first full album. And that came out, oh goodness, I think 2016. And that was the first time I put my language of Amharic into my music. It was the first time that my parents were actually on the album. They sang a song with me on that album. But the funny thing is, being Austin born and bred, I had yet to really do anything in Austin. This is me in New York at SOB's, which is an iconic venue. But then in January of 2017, I was named Artist of the Month by the Austin American Statesman. And that's when I realized, wow, I've done something here at home. I've been able to tell my story. I've been perfecting it. I've been dealing with it internally, trying to figure out how do I tell my story. I'm still scared. I'm not the most brave person. I'm super shy. I did that, and then this year I put out Move Me Too, a follow-up to that first project that was stemmed from just a simple tweet. And in this project, I really felt like I came into my own. I'm gonna look at my notes. And it's crazy because I have played ACL now. I have done South by Southwest. I have played at Waterloo Records. I've had my records sitting there. And not too long ago, about 2 weeks ago, I quit my 9-to-5 to pursue music full time. And I was in London for the past 5 days performing at a film premiere representing Austin, Texas, and the United States. And here I am today. So my message is to believe in yourself, to believe in your story, and to tell your story. And my purpose is to be here because my name is Moded, which means to love, in Addi Salam, which is a new world. So I'm here to lead with love. And so that's the end of my presentation. Some people call me crazy, some people call me mad, but I'm just singing about love, y'all. Love we wish we had. They tell me, baby, switch it up. No one speaks the language of love. They're all fed up, they wanna hear you tell them it's impossible, yeah. I'm singing about how I found love once in my life. I'm singing about how that same love gives me my drive, yeah. Some people call me crazy, some people call me mad, but I'm just singing about love, y'all. A love we wish we had, yeah, 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 yeah. And even when the whole world doubts me, you'll believe me. Yeah, you believe me, it's gonna be okay. Yeah, 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 yeah. Till our final day. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And even when the whole world's crumbling, you'll believe me. Yeah, you'll believe me. Yeah, yeah, yeah. When you find something so powerful, let them say what they want. The truth can do no wrong, yeah. If love can take you higher, why would you live with your feet on the ground? Baby, this is bigger than me, bigger than you. I'm just trying to share my religion. This is bigger than me, bigger than you. I'm just trying to share my religion. It's gonna be okay, okay, okay. Cause we're gonna love this way, way, way. And even when the whole world doubts me, you'll believe me. Yeah, you'll believe me. It's gonna be okay. Yeah, 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 yeah. Cause we're gonna love this way. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And even when the whole world's crumbling, you'll believe me. Yeah, you'll believe me.